all received feedback forms. I request you to please take some time, fill them in, and drop it off at the registration desk on your way out. Thank you. So we're especially pleased to have two male speakers present with us today, Mr. Pankaj Rai and Mr. Varadachari. Our next speaker is Mr. Varadachari, Partner and India Leader, Global Compliance and Reporting, Ernst & Young, who is going to talk to us about creating effective, flexible workplaces. I think very fitting for a gentleman to deliver this speech. So during his 25 years as a professional, Bharat has successfully delivered on his obligation as a global leader for E&Y's Client Services Group, which was previously known as the Global Talent Hub, within E&Y Global Delivery Services. In his current role, Bharat heads GCR sub-service line and tax at E&Y India and has worked extensively with both Indian and foreign companies and advised them on their Indian tax, exchange control, foreign investment, and other government policy implications of doing business in India or overseas. Bharat is a chartered accountant by profession and a commerce graduate from Mumbai University. He also has, to his credit, a lovely family comprising of his wife Tejaswini and sons Vedant and Vyas. Travel, photography, and music are amongst his passion. I encourage you to please come on stage and share your kind words.
Great. Thank you. So firstly, I have to say thank you to the Embassy Group for this invite and for organizing this event. I think these are all issues that I never tire speaking about, so every such opportunity is always welcome. So do bear with me while I transport you from the magical world of dance to the mundane world of tax and accounting. Yeah. So I come from what is often described as a pressure cooker environment, of professional services. And it's interesting because when I started my career, presenteeism in the office equaled productivity. And this is like 20 years ago, right? So I used to have my timesheet checked regularly to see, has this person come into the office on a Saturday? Why is he not in the office after 6 o'clock, right? And I used to have a difficult time answering those questions. Until I had this young colleague of mine, this lady, who once asked the boss, said, sir, why don't we start our day at 5 in the evening? Why don't we come into the office at 5? Because in any case, work starts only after 5. So she very quickly got labeled a tigress at that point in time for challenging the organization. But I have to say that the profession has moved significantly since then. So I'm really, really pleased with what's happened. For the last 4 years, EY has been winning a Diversity Impact Award, and that's great because it's in succession. And our leader, the leader of our D&I initiative, has personally also been felicitated twice for the game-changing role that she's played in terms of getting us, off the graph. So it's really interesting. EY today is focused on creating what we refer to as a workplace of the future. We've recently rechristened that and we now call it new ways of working, right? And flexibility is a critical element of that. So let's just talk about what we are doing around flexibility. I think there are different ways in which you can capture that. Flexibility as we see it is about time. So, when do people work in the organization? It's about where do you actually work? It's about how you work. It's about leave and our policies around leave. And finally, it's also about career flexibility. So in terms of timing, I think we are very clear that you have your typical 9:30 to 5:30 routine. But flexibility for us means permitting people to choose their timings. So it could be someone coming in at 11 but leaving much later. It could be someone who says, hey, I don't want to work 5 days a week. I can clock all of that time in four days. You know, so those are some of the elements that we've looked at and said that, look, this is how we need to accommodate specific requirements. You also have the concept of where you work from, right? So work from home is something that is very common. We have people who work from multiple offices. So, you know, I am a great example of that today. In fact, you know, because of this event, I chose to work at a very, very different office, which really has nothing to do with, you know, where I normally operate from. So we have that flexibility, and in some parts, we also have the flexibility for people to work in different offices, in different cities, at different times of the year. So that's the piece really around, you know, working from a different location. Very recently, we introduced a policy which said that working women who have children up to the age of 5 can work up to 5 days a week for at least 6 months from home. And they have a choice to extend that even beyond those 6 months. You know, we also looked at women who have children who are, let's say, from 6 to 12 years old, and we said they are free to work until 3:30 and then go home and log in from home and work, right? So these are some examples of things that we did just to make sure that we are more accommodating in terms of what specific needs people might have. And the how part that I talked about is also really interesting, because at the end of the day, if you're not going to get good connectivity, you're obviously not going to be able to work from home. So we are even sponsoring for working mothers high-speed internet so that they can work from home. You know, so it's really around trying to see how you can create an enabling environment, and that merely coming to the office and being present is not an indicator of how productive you are. So I think for a professional accounting and tax firm to move from where I described we were to where we are today is quite an achievement. There's career flexibility as well. So, you know, we have a very interesting recent policy we introduced which said that when women choose to leave the workforce at any point in time up to 5 years, they are welcome to come back and join the organization in the same role. So I think these are some of the measures that we have taken to try and create that environment. Now, when I look back and reflect on why we have been able to create this impact, there are a set of ingredients, if I may call it that, which have really helped us. Let's start with the fact that we decided to appoint a dedicated diversity leader. So this is not someone who's moonlighting on the job, but someone whose only role is to focus on the diversity and inclusiveness agenda. So we have that leader, and the passion of that leader has directly translated into the change that we've been able to deliver, right? So that is number one. Number two, we made sure that this was not an HR initiative, because it's business that has to be accountable for this. It cannot be just HR or talent in the organization. So we created a diversity council which has an equal representation of men and women, and this group comprises business leaders and not just the HR leader. So creating accountability at the highest level beyond just lip service to an initiative like D&I becomes really crucial. The third, and I'm glad it was mentioned that there are two men here in the room, right, who are part of the speaking panel. So this cannot afford to be an initiative by women for women. So you have to have an equal role being played by men. So we have made sure that in every practice and sub-practice, we have a male sponsor. And we also introduce sponsorship programs where we have a male sponsor who takes responsibility for women, for our most promising talent in the organization. So by ensuring that this is not a women-only initiative, we've really broad-based the impact across the organization. So I would say that's the third element, which is men plus women, not just women only. We also recognize that this is a journey that we are on, right? So I like to describe this by referring it to as the 3 A's. We say awareness. You need to make both men and women aware. Second is accountability, which is creating some clear goals in terms of saying where are you today and where do you want to go to. And of course, it's very nice to see goals, on someone's scorecard, but are those really being actioned, which is the third A. So the 3 A's is really about awareness, accountability, and then following that up with action. The fourth element is branding and communications. Oftentimes you find that D&I is messaged as something that's nice to do, and that doesn't work. Unless and until it's deeply embedded in the DNA of the organization, we have to also realize that the kind of people who are walking through our doors these days, millennials, right? For them, this is not something which is nice to have. They expect that flexibility. They want more of a work-life balance as compared to many others. So in communicating about D&I, it's really important to make sure that this is something that is a must have or must do and not something which is nice to have. And I often see that there's lip service in some parts of the business, in some organizations, but when you see how further they've gone down, there's not much to show, unfortunately, right? So the communication part becomes really critical. There are some interesting situations that we encountered at EY. So our focus, and this is gender neutral, but our focus is on making sure that we are attracting, developing, growing, and retaining the best possible talent, and that we would do anything and everything to achieve that. And it's quite interesting that the first creche that we set up many years ago was in fact a direct product of this. We had a girl who was an outstanding performer. She was about to become a mother, and she decided that she didn't want to be in the workforce, and there was no such policy at all. So overnight we converted one of the meeting rooms into a creche. We managed to get a microwave, a refrigerator, and created like a cot, and said, look, you need to bring your own help, but this is a creche for you, and we cannot afford to let go of you. You're not leaving. And as they say, necessity is the mother of invention, right? So this is exactly what happened. It was a business need. We were not going to let go of a very, very talented person, but on the other hand, we found that we didn't have what we required to make this work. So we just created the creche, and there's been no looking back. So every one of our offices now has a creche. So I think that our focus on retaining and growing talent in the organization is actually indirectly what led us to coming up with a solution which actually helped, and that person is still in the organization after more than a decade. So that was the other element. And then I would say, if we try to look at developing policies from a slightly different perspective, it's always often about what should we do as an organization, but instead, how about looking at this a little differently and saying, what do our people want? So we discovered that there were women who were very tense when their children were giving the 10th standard exams, right? And we found that the beauty is that when we took stock in the entire organization, there were like maybe 10 or 15 women who said this, like, hey, we've got kids in the 10th standard. So we said, why do we need to create a policy only if there are 1,000 such people? These are 10 people, there's a situation, they're tense. So why don't we create that environment where they're free to work from home? And this might all sound quite strange, given that this is a cutthroat, as I said, a high pressure organization where the clients are at the center of our universe. So there's always the fear that we might fall short, right, in terms of dealing with clients. But I think what we do is make sure we balance things out. We balance things out and we say, look, this is not a response to you to say that you don't need to work. This is to create the environment where you can work, and therefore please feel free to work from home, right? So I think there are a number of such examples where we have responded to the voice of the women in the organization and said, hey, okay, let's do this. So there are so many examples, whether it's coaching around maternity, there's coaching around marriage, and we find that the points where people drop out of the workforce, some of them say, hey, we're getting married, we can't work. And then, we don't always take no for an answer. So we have enough mechanisms in play to really work with the teams, use a lot of role models in the organization to say, here are the women who've decided to get married or decided to have children, but have chosen to come back to the workforce or have chosen to work. And here are their stories. And so please talk to them. We don't want to be pontificating on this issue, so you please speak to the live examples. And that's really worked. So coaching is another way in which we've been able to make sure that we don't lose people from the workforce. So these are some of the elements that we had introduced, or the areas that we had focused on. The last that, being an accountant, I couldn't resist talking about numbers, is data. And we really choose to ignore data. So one of the things that I had done around a year ago was to assess every single business unit on the basis of the number of women we were attracting, the manner in which the women were being promoted, because sometimes you have unconscious bias in the ways in which women are being rated as well, and also made sure that we looked at how many women we were promoting, right? And finally, the attrition part. So right from attract, grow, develop, and attrition. And it was quite telling, because as we got into the details, we were able to compare and contrast and say which are the groups that are doing very well on attract, which are the ones that are doing a great job of promoting women. We pulled all the best practices, and the data gave us a basis for challenging the business to say that no more excuses, right? And you have to commit to making a change. And that's where the accountability comes in, because once they're staring at data, and we can impolitely call it name and shame, and politely call it peer pressure, So this was really about peer pressure between all of us in this room. And so that really drove very, very different behaviors in the organization. So I would say that the graph that we've been able to traverse, from the very humble beginnings, the baby steps, if I may call it, to the giant strides that we've made over the last 4 or 5 years, has been largely on account of all that I just described. And as we look into the future, right, there's a more fundamental question that we are asking ourselves, and we are talking more and more about, which is let's keep gender aside. What is the kind of culture that we want to build in this organization? And the answer to us is, we want to build a culture of empathy, we want to build a culture of trust, and we want to build a culture of teaming and collaboration. And if we focus on these three, put ourselves in people's shoes, right? They're looking for empathy when they say, hey, I'm sorry, but I can't come in on Mondays. We're looking for trust when someone says, okay, I'll allow you to work only 3 days a week. Trust because you believe that they will complete what is assigned to them in the comfort of their homes. And teaming and collaboration, yes, because it's never easy to work virtually, isn't it? So if you create a culture of empathy in the organization, a culture of trust, and a culture of teaming and collaboration, then I think, flexibility, there's no question about it. It's very, very clear that it's going to be staring you in the face, right? So with that, I think that's it from my side. So happy.
How often have you heard of a woman entrepreneur building a successful business predominantly solving problems that women face? Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet Dr. Saundarya Rajesh, an award-winning thought leader, entrepreneur, writer, and women's career evangelist. Dr. Soundarya is one of India's earliest voices to speak on the entire D&I initiative. She has won a slew of awards. It's a really long list, but I'm going to read through a few of those. The Standard Chartered Scope Woman Exemplar Award, 2006. The Yuva Shakti Women Entrepreneur Award, 2007. The Cavan Care Innovation Award, 2011. And the TIE Stree Shakti Entrepreneur of the Year Award, 2011. For her work in building and creative India's first women's career services, the list goes on. She was also awarded the Swadeshi Jagran Manch Woman Entrepreneur Award, the Fiki Flow Woman Entrepreneur of the Year Award 2012, the Naturals Extraordinary Women 2014, and the JPR Icon Award 2016. In Jan 2016, she won the highly prestigious 100 Women Achievers of India Award in a public voting selection process. Recently, she was named to the United Nations list of 25 women transforming India, developed by the Niti Aayog. Founder and president of Avatar Career Creations and Flexi Careers India, Dr. Soundarya's biggest claim to fame is the undoubted fact that under her guidance and mentoring, India has seen the advent of formal second career programs for women, which was adopted by over a dozen large organizations, leading to resurrection of the careers of several thousands of women. Flexi Careers India, a social enterprise founded by Dr. Soundarya, is arguably India's #1 expert on women's career. Without further ado, Dr. Soundarya.
Good to go. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Before I begin speaking about, creating effective, flexible workspaces, I have to give you a little bit of a background, small rewind. Why did I get into the space of urging corporate India to be more flexible? The story goes back a couple of decades, more than that, and you'll guess my age, so I'm just going to keep it vague. A couple of decades back, I was married, had a lovely job, then had a baby, and then was hit by the fact that it's all completely unsustainable. I was not able to pull the whole thing together for one reason, because even before the words work-life balance became popular, I don't think I had any. And just to take off a little bit about this whole concept of work-life balance, I think the entire concept is essentially flawed. Now you may be wondering, how is it that somebody who won a slew of awards, blah, 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 about doing work in the space of women, about creating flexible working spaces for women, who runs a company called Flexi Careers India, and I'm speaking about the fact that work-life balance is a flawed concept. Bear with me. Work-life balance, when I'm telling you that concept, what is the image that comes to your mind? Work-life balance. Yeah? So it's basically about balancing two things. It's about having work on this hand, life on this other hand, and then you have a physical balance you can imagine. And then, work goes up, life comes down, life goes up, work comes down. The two are essentially in conflict with each other. Then what are we talking about the concept of work-life balance? There is no such thing as work-life balance. Please do not peruse it. Do not go into the fallacy of thinking that you're going to actually have these two neatly divided parts of your life, work and then life, and then the twain shall never meet, and then they are the ones that are going to be actually helping you with your career. No, I'm sorry, that's not what I have experienced. That's not what research says. That's absolutely not what the lives of the most successful women that you would have ever seen says. It is time to change the language. It should be called work-life integration. And this is something we've been talking for almost a decade now. Because when you talk about integrating, then you're talking about, it coming together like this. Work and life integrating this way. Which means parts of life flow into work, parts of work flow into life. And then it becomes one glorious, maybe imbalanced thing, where you are actually, pursuing something with great deal of passion. And then the other parts of your life are not as high as you would expect them to be. But then that is what is life all about. That is what is work-life integration. And from that concept stems this whole idea around flexibility. Why do you need flexibility? Bharat beautifully explained the different forms of flexibility. You have very many flavors of flexible working, as we call it. When we conducted India's first ever Flexi Careers project, which was in 2007, for a very large multinational organization, when we started asking them details about what is the type of flexi working you want, over a dozen flavors came up. A dozen ways in which you can work flexibly. And you did have multiple things. You did have time-led flexibility. You had skills-led flexibility. You had location-led flexibility. You had career flexibility and so on. But you know what? The millennials have changed all that. And the reason is, there was a research that was conducted not more than a few months back, which said that of the top 5 things which women wanted in life, in their careers, flexibility was not one of them. You know what women want? Women want power. Would you agree with me? Yes. Women want power. We want power. We want the power to change. We want the power to choose if we want to be flexible or not. We want the power to determine what type of job to pursue. We want the power to be able to make an influence. The top things that women wanted out of their career, and I'm sure every single woman in this room will agree. First is to pursue a career which has meaning and purpose. Second, to be recognized for whatever you do. Third, to be able to empower and enable others. And fourth, to be financially independent. These were the things women wanted. Flexibility doesn't seem to be anywhere in the picture. Work-life balance seems very passé. It is important. Obviously, nobody can undermine the importance of managing the different aspects of your life. But is it the thing that has to be completely center stage? No. When you pursue your career intentionally, the priorities just kind of fall in place. Of course, you need to have lists. I'm a huge list freak. I have lists everywhere. Whenever I look at, wherever I see, I would find lists. Because I have things which I keep, having to finish, having to tick off, having to complete. So obviously you will need a lot of planning. When you heard Dr. Ananda speak about, the fact that we have 24 hours and that's a lot of time, I couldn't agree more. Because there is a lot of time and there is so much that you can accomplish in those 24 hours. But the fact of the matter is you need a great deal of planning, you need a lot of preparation. And when you start pursuing balance and you start thinking that everything must be equal, that is when the problem sets in. It is not likely to be equal. So give up that entire concept of flexibility and flexible working. Instead, if you are truly to create a career that is purposeful, meaningful, successful, then manage work-life integration just the way you would manage any other project. Resource it. Find stakeholders who will support you. Create a complete ally network. We all speak about allies, and we somehow have this fallacy, that allies are only relegated to the workplace, that allies are only there at the workplace in the form of mentors or in the form of coaches or counselors and so on. No, allies are everywhere. I'd like you to bear in mind this really famous adage, behind every successful man there is a woman, behind every successful woman is a reliable maid. Without that ally network, without having people who are going to be able to be there for you, help you, how is it that it's going to be possible for all of us women in such a, fast super metro like this city, right, where we all commute crazy distances to get to work? How would we be able to do all of that if we didn't plan? So the one thing I somehow feel that most women, especially in the early career stages, mostly millennials, expect is not as much flexibility as predictability. Do you actually want everything to be predictable? Do you not want that last minute 6 o'clock, alarm call where you have to complete a project just before you step out of the office? That kind of unpredictability is not something women appreciate. The flip side to flexibility is the fact that you also need a lot of predictability to be able to run the different aspects of your life, especially when it's not just your career that you're focused on. It's also a demanding and equally important career of your spouse or a significant other. So when that is also an equally important pursuit, how do you plan all of these things in your life? Coming to the whole aspect of flexible working, in an organization, whenever we have worked with companies and we have helped them create flexible workspaces, we've always found two very critical challenges that we have seen as almost impediments to creating truly flexible workspaces. One is the mindset of the manager, the mindset of the people under whom the flexible workforce actually exists. So when you start educating the managers and you actually give them, a set of sort of, guidelines by which they can help themselves become more flexible, more attuned to the whole concept of flexibility, there you find flexi working really succeeds. When managers begin looking at it as a strategic initiative, not as a tactical, kind of a transactional fix, but you actually look at it saying that, what, I'm creating a workplace of the future. I'm going to be looking at this wonderful talent pool, and this talent pool is going to be leveraged in the form of greater productivity when I start depending, trusting on them, and when I start looking at it as a strategic initiative. So that big mindset change is the first thing that we find in organizations where we try and implement flexible working. The second thing is the attitude of the people who are the beneficiaries of flexible working. There is an IT organization with whom we were consulting, and when we work in creating a flexible work environment, we do two things called flexidizing and unbundling. Flexidizing is basically understanding the flex quotient of each job. Is your job truly lending itself to flexibility? Is that a job you can perform at home or at a remote location or elsewhere? Is that the kind of job you do? Or is it a job that requires equipments which are only available at the office and it is not going to be possible for you to work flexibly? So first of all, a keen understanding of how flexible is your job really going to be. And that flex quotient is determined by what we call the process of flexidizing. And then you have the other process called unbundling. And in unbundling, what do? We break down the job into all its components and look at all the different feeds that actually create the job for what it is. So who impacts your job and your output impacts whom? So you have all these different mixes and matches that happen, and that in turn actually tells you if your job can be performed in one of the many different flexible working methods. So you have flexidizing, which is actually a very strict, you can't call it an exactly binary sort of an equation, yes or no, because it's a continuum and all jobs fall within various parts of that continuum. And then you have unbundling, which tells you what form of flexible working can you actually assign to that job. So this is the process that we do when we go to organizations to actually create truly flexible workplaces. In one such organization, it was an IT company, when we went there and we did this entire process, we found that they had implemented a work from home project, albeit not completely, and it was aborted midway. So I got down to looking at the data around it. And as you mentioned, Bharat, I think data is where the success of a truly flexible work environment really rests, because the more you research, the more you understand how those jobs are performing, the more you know the feedback of the managers, supervisors, and the individuals. I think you would be able to tighten it so much better and actually make it more productive. So we took this bunch of data and we started assessing it, and we discovered something. There had been a lady who had gone on maternity break, and then she had said, please give me work from home because I need to work from home and I need to look after my baby and so on. And the manager had approved the work from home. But after that, neither did she take the initiative to find out what was the job and the responsibility and everything assigned to her, nor did the manager actually try and understand, whether this lady who's supposedly working from home has actually been given any KRAs, assignments or anything at all. So for a cool year and a half, the lady just sat at home, she got a paycheck, she did the mandatory, signing or whatever it is that needed to be done, and nobody was the wiser for it. And that created such a bad taste, as you can well imagine, in everybody concerned. Not just the management, not just the managers, not just the organization, but the women too. Considering, when somebody has been so gracious and has actually looked at creating a solution, then it's not the onus on the woman herself, to try and say that, hey, you know what, I'm there at home, but I haven't been given any assignment, so let me know what I should do. So I think that's the second piece. While the first piece is about sensitizing the managers to actually look at this as a strategic imperative, use data, look at robust forms of communication which will remove all glitches. The second piece rests with the women. And when I get into this piece, I'd just like to share something a little bit more with you all. About 18 months back, we at Avatar, we embarked upon a very important piece of research. Now this research was actually transformational as far as women's careers in India is concerned, because it discovered the secret to why certain women from the same environments are doing so much better even when faced with challenges, even when faced with all the different aspects that all women face by way of problems and challenges which come in their way. How are some women alone able to do so very well? What is the secret of their success? Now this was analyzed as a longitudinal research study whose results came out about 18 months ago. And what we essentially did was we tracked the careers of close to about 2,500 men and women, successful men and women in various organizations, and EY partnered with us in that. And we found out that there was this one magic bullet. There was this one thing, very interesting thing, which people who were successful exhibited, and gender again was not a factor, it was gender neutral. This skill or this success factor I call intentionality. Now intentionality, as the word itself denotes, means having a purpose, having a certain sankalpa as they call it in Sanskrit, where you say that I am going to do this, I intend doing it, and I will not brook any type of challenges that come my way, and I will ensure it gets done. That thing you call it, that's a general feeling of intentionality. But how do you break it down into an acquirable skill? I mean, are you born with it? Are you either born with intentionality or you're not? Is there any way in which somebody can learn intentionality as they go through in their lives? Or does it have to be very strong, life-changing events that give you intentionality? Can't we just pick up intentionality just the way you pick up cycling or swimming or any other type of skill? Yes, you can. Because what intentionality manifests itself in the workplace is as a set of skills, as a set of congruent competencies. And what are these competencies? I'll just name a few to you. Things like networking, making a conscious effort to network. Women, they say, are very poor at it, and data backs that. Do you know when is the first time in a woman's life or career that she actually begins to take the effort to network? Would you know? Would you happen to, hazard a guess? Age? At school, a woman begins networking? When she has children and at the children's school. Good guess, good guess. But even that is a little far off. Any other guesses? When do you think a woman actually begins to professionally network in her life? When she gets married, professionally network? Well, I agree. I mean, there is a certain amount of professional interest which is vested in. As Sheryl Sandberg says, the best career choice that you can make is your best career decision you can make is your choice of a spouse. So maybe, I think professionally also it might be useful. That's very different. But the answer, ladies, is 41. It's at the grand ripe old age of 41 that women actually begin to develop networks. And can you take a guess as to the male equivalent of that? 18, 14, 22, 28. It's actually 17. You were close to that. 17. Boys, actually, not even men, they begin creating networks. They begin creating non-family support systems. And that is key to it. When you're able to create non-family allies, non-family support systems, then you're able to actually build a very strong, robust network, which goes on, and then we call it the old boys club and all that, but the fact is that, it's just there. It's there in their genes. You can't help it. And we don't have an old women's club because women don't age. So there's no old women's club at all. So the point is, things like networking, which have to be cultivated as a skill, things like fortitude, the ability to face up to challenges, things like problem solving, which is, there is a structured method to problem solving, and all of us, we can take those problems up and we can solve them. So how do we learn these things? When we begin learning these skills, and there are another 7 or 8 other skills, which goes on to focus, it goes on to work-life integration, it goes on to, multiple different skills, and when you begin demonstrating these skills at your workplace, then that means you're intentional about your career. And when you become intentional about your career, you will be amazed. It's just like what they say in the book, The Secret. You will find that solutions appear around you. If it is flexibility you're seeking, you will get that flexibility. If it is a mentor you seek, you will get that mentor. If it is a very inspiring peer group you seek, you will get that. But the important thing is for you to be invested in your career. And the success of any such initiative taken by a corporate, taken by a well-meaning, discerning, large-hearted corporate, to help its women population, whether it's, flexible working or it's second career programs or it's, different new ways of, engaging with different talent pools, whatever it is, it can all be successful only when it comes back to you, to the power of one, to where it starts. Just to go back to my story a little bit, the reason I started or I founded Avatar in the year 2000, and today we have 2.5 lakh women on the network. About 40,000 women are all second career women who have taken breaks in career and come back and seek coming back into the workplace. We have got several hundred organizations who we work with who provide career opportunities to lakhs and lakhs of women. So when we started Avatar in 2000, it was actually because I did not have any other way. I took a break in career 4 years into my job, and after that, when I went looking for a job that would offer me a certain margin of flexibility, I didn't find anything. It was the mid-90s and these terms did not exist back then. They were not fashionable. They were not in season. So you never knew what these things were. So you went and told a company, is it possible for me to work till 4 o'clock, then I go back and then I come back. We had computers, we had everything. We were a very high-tech organization that I used to work in. But the mindset was not there. So I took the break. I took the inevitable break. And for the next 4 years, I struggled to find a job. Why? Because the fact that I had taken the break was held against me. You kind of do the unpardonable sin because you've taken a break in career. And let me tell you, thousands upon thousands of women in India today are still bearing the brunt of that. So what essentially happened was, after that, when I tried various options, teaching was the one solution that I kind of hit upon. So I decided, rather than just not do anything and keep on finding that elusive job which doesn't seem to exist anywhere at all, let me start doing something, and I started teaching. And that opened doors for me because I began mentoring my own students, and they were all women. And I realized that they also were going through the exact same career decision making process, a futile one where they were actually killing their careers even before it was born. And they were all focused towards going to that same place where they would work for a few years and then drop off into absolute economic oblivion, where you're not even a statistic. Right? So that kind of got me started, and I decided that there has to be an economic model associated with this. We are not an NGO. We are a social enterprise. There are 3 organizations that I run. One, the largest, is a social enterprise. The one which is into business as usual recruitment is a for-profit commercial enterprise. And we have a trust. And in that trust, we have initiated a project called Putri, which I just want to, leave you with a few thoughts on. Putri, as the name denotes, is about India's daughters, but they are not the privileged daughters like all of us or our children. These are the underprivileged girls of India studying in corporation or government schools from below poverty line families in the age groups of 13 to 18. These are girls who are currently in schools only in Tamil Nadu and Pondicherry. These are girls who come from families where 80% of the fathers are alcoholics. The mothers work 4 to 5 jobs in 3 shifts to put food on the table. They come from families where there are at least 2 to 3 children, if not more. And educating all of those children is a huge, gigantic problem. So what does Putri hope to do? Putri plans to adopt, or has begun the process of adopting, 10,000 children, 10,000 girl children this first year of its launch across 100 schools in Tamil Nadu and Pondicherry. And what we are going to train them is not about English speaking skills. There are multiple organizations that are doing that. It's not about math or STEM sciences. Again, there are many companies and organizations which are interested and invested in that. We are simply teaching them the skill of being intentional. We are actually just telling them, how do you become intentional in your career? You already have an economic imperative. You want to pull your life out of poverty. You want to pull your families out of that poverty. You're ready to go to a job when you're 14 years of age. If your parents pull you out of school saying that you've attained puberty and they can't afford to send you, you're ready to go and work in some house as a servant maid. You're ready to do various other activities, socially evil, which actually cause such a great amount of problems for all our young girls, which includes prostitution, sexual abuse, domestic violence, early childbirth, malnutrition, all of these things, infant mortality, all of these things. You're ready to all of that just because you want to escape this world. Become career intentional. Then what you will actually do would be, not only will you find yourselves a white collar job, but you will actually pull your entire self, your families, out of poverty into a better socio-economic group. So this is the purpose of Project Putri. It came from a research again that we did, which spoke about how women from these kind of underprivileged backgrounds actually bucked the trend of attrition. While early career stages, you will find that 48% of all women under the age of 30 take a break in career at least once. We discovered this gold mine of about 487 women who we came across as part of our research, and we discovered that they had not taken a break in 8 years of their career, early career stages. And they were all women who came from similar underprivileged families. So that led us to the creation of Project Putri, and I really hope that each one of you would be able to support Project Putri as well. You can find more details on it on our website, www.avtarivan.com. And I also request each one of you to be your own greatest investor. Please invest in yourselves, in your careers. If flexibility is the answer, it will come to you. If anything else is the answer, it will also come to you. All you need to do is just be intentional. Thank you so much.